Yo, what's up, guys? Before we start this podcast, I want to address a couple quick things. First things first, and most importantly, you might hear kind of some background noise, especially coming from my mic at certain points throughout this podcast and in the last one too. I recorded a couple of these in my basement just because it was late at night and I was trying to not wake up people, and the heater was going off. So that's that. Hopefully it doesn't bug you guys too much. I just wanted to address that. Also, keep in mind that we recorded these podcasts a bit ahead of time. So, like for example, on this, when we're touching on the Astros, it says something about JD Martinez. Turns out he actually got released like 12 hours after we recorded this. So apologies on that front. So just keep that in mind. But without further ado, here you go.
What's going on, everyone? It's Ryan, and today we are doing the AL West. We are here with the season preview podcast, and I'm joined here by Ian. Say what's up, Ian.
What is going down, everybody?
So, I guess you're going to be starting out with the Houston Astros.
Yep, we'll get right into it with the Houston Astros, the fifth place or last place team in the AL West last season, who finished 51 and 111. Pretty pathetic, but they had a pretty quiet offseason. They signed Chad Qualls to a low-level contract, former reliever for the Miami Marlins. They acquired Dexter Fowler for Jordan Lyles and Brandon Barnes. They also acquired Anthony Bass from San Diego. He was the number one pick in the Rule 5 draft. They also got Jesus Guzman from the Padres. And they signed Jesse Crain to a one-year contract, as well as Scott Feldman to a 3-year, $30 million contract, in which was probably their biggest move of the offseason. So obviously not a big offseason from a team that was not that good last year. So Ryan, what do you think about this team?
I think the Scott Feldman signing is kind of interesting because, like, depending on how their prospects can kind of play out, they got a ton of young kids in that rotation this year. For 3 years, $30 million, that's actually kind of cheap because eventually, if these guys can really progress in these two or 3 years, he can be a pretty solid number 3 starter. And if you have like Jared Cosard, Brad Peacock, or some of those guys ahead of him, I mean, that's actually a pretty solid rotation. Maybe could definitely get the playoffs that year, depending on how well those guys are actually doing. And then also Jesse Crain for 1 year, $3 million. I really think he's just going to become trade bait because if he can return from that shoulder injury that's really affected him, then I mean they can get some decent prospects from him. So I don't know. There really isn't much to say about this team, to be quite honest.
I agree with the Feldman signing. I was originally not a big fan of it just because I think $30 million to a guy with a career 4.62 ERA, not something I would do. But I think where the Astros are going with the signing is it's good to have a veteran presence in that rotation. I think with Bud Norris gone, that's what they lack, and it's not in the sense that he's going to, lift them up, so to say. I think what it is you have a lot of young arms coming up in the coming years. Astros, obviously, one of the, if not the best farm systems in baseball, including a lot of good young pitching. And what a guy like Scott Feldman does is he's just a guy that, a young guy can come up like a Jared Cosard who he kind of just role model after, see what he does, see how he acts on his in-between days, and just kind of be a mentor for him. And I think that's more what the Scott Feldman signing is, more so than any performance-based thing. And I think with, Bud Norris gone, I think he was that guy in previous years, and I think now they needed to replace that type of veteran on the team. And I think that's where they were going with the Scott Feldman signing. As for the rest of their offseason moves, I liked the Dexter Fowler thing. I mean, I like Fowler as a player. He had a
steal.
Yeah, I mean, he had a 776 OPS last year, 863 in 2012. They gave up, two pretty, kind of okay prospects. And like I said, it's a very deep farm system, so it's not like they're going to miss those guys, I don't think. And you get Fowler, another veteran guy who is going to be arbitration eligible up until 2016, in which he'll become a free agent. He could become trade bait by then. But I like Fowler as a player, and I think that he can be I think he can be a pretty good player for this team moving forward. And maybe he can be, a key piece on a team in a couple of years if they start competing. But like you said, it's a team that's going to be pretty bad this year again. I don't think this is going to be their year to come up and make some noise. I think they're still a year or two away from that phase. But it's a team with a great farm system, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be one of the better younger teams in baseball in the coming years. But do you have any final thoughts?
Nope. We'll get to our off-season grades. I guess I'll go first. I'm gonna give them a C. I mean, it really wasn't that big of an off-season, but definitely get Dexter Fowler. I mean, you traded away Jordan Lyles, and his ERA last year was, I think, 5.91. So he was pretty bad, and he wasn't really performing very well. And they got a pretty decent player can make that team a little bit more competitive. So I'm giving them a C.
I gave them a C as well. It's not much. It's it was not a big off season at all. And I guess I could have upped the grade a little bit because I did like the Fowler thing, and I did like the Scott Feldman signing. Just kind of from what I talked about. And Crane could be trade bait if he comes back. He had a sub-1 ERA last year in the first half before he got hurt. So if he does come back to his old form, he could become good trade bait. But I mean, it was kind of a nothing off season. I don't think a lot of these moves are going to be. I guess
long term.
Yeah, and I don't think these moves are really going to affect the team in 3 years. And if you look at the team, it's a team that's aiming for 3 years from now. So I guess in that sense, it was kind of a nothing off season. But it's a patient off season. It's the right mindset. So I gave it a C. But I mean, I was I'd be satisfied by this off season if I was an Astros fan. Do you want to move on to the over unders?
Yeah. So the over under this team is 62.5, and I think that they finished with only 51 wins last year. They got Dexter Fowler, but they also didn't. That's also having a half season of Bud Norris, and they do get Scott Feldman. We'll see how he does, but I definitely don't see an 11-win improvement from this team, so I'm taking the under, or the 12-win improvement.
Yeah, I think the under is a pretty easy one on this. It's a team that's also not trying to be that good, so and I guess kind of the whole tanking thing isn't really something that comes up too often in baseball, but obviously I don't think this team would shy away from another number one overall pick in the 2015 MLB draft. So I don't think it's a team that's going to be, and I think if they have players that do step up by the time the trade deadline comes around, like a JD Martinez or something like that, maybe they will look to trade those guys, and that'll hurt the team. So I don't think this team is going to make an 11-win improvement. So I'm taking the under.
All right, so we're going to be moving on to the Seattle Mariners, who finished 71-91 last year, fourth in the AL West. They did have a pretty big offseason with the signing of Robinson Cano, which we'll probably talk about in a minute. 10 years, $240 million for him. Also signed Fernando Rodney for 2 years, $14 million. Acquired Logan Morrison from the Marlins. Signed Corey Hart for 1 year, $6 million. He's going to be the DH. Well, he's actually their DH right now. I don't know if he's going to be moving to first base or right field like they've been talking about. They also signed John Buck to be their backup catcher. So, what do you think about this team, man? I mean, a pretty big offseason from them getting Cano.
They definitely made a big splash for the Robinson Cano signing, and I think they've kind of, set this presence, so to say, that they are going to be a big spender in the coming years, and that they're going to be someone to be reckoned with in the coming years. Cano is one of those players that definitely got overpaid. 8 years from now, he's not going to be worth $24 million. No one's debating that. But just looking at it as if, they're getting the player Robinson Cano, who is arguably the best second baseman in baseball, that's obviously a plus signing for them. So in the short term, it's definitely going to help them. I really liked the Corey Hart signing. Hart's a guy that was really productive when he was healthy a couple years ago. Obviously, He's had surgeries on both knees now, so that could affect him moving forward, but he's never been a mobile guy. So I don't think it's going to affect that part of his game too much. And he was a really productive player a couple years ago. I think that signing him in a 1-year contract, that's a brilliant move from the Mariners. I was actually hoping the Red Sox would go after him if Mike Napoli ended up departing, but obviously it did not happen. So I do know that Corey Hart. Sorry to interrupt you, but
that's fine. I do know that I think he batted 270 for like 3 years straight or something like that. So that's pretty good, consistent production right there.
Yeah, and I think he had a plus 800 OPS. So in a couple of years. So he's a really good player when he was healthy, and I think today's medical advancements. I think there's a good chance that he returns to that old form. So. I think it was a good signing. And the Logan Morrison thing made a little bit less sense to me just because I get that you kind of got him for a nothing player in Carter Capps, but at the same time, you have Morrison, Corey Hart, and Justin Smoke, who, albeit kind of quietly, did have a pretty productive year last year, hitting 20 home runs, 746 OPS. So I think you kind of have a logjam with those positions. I don't know what they're doing. And then I also think, at this point, it kind of looks silly to have traded for Logan Morrison. You probably could have just gotten Kendrys Morales back for a cheap contract. I guess it would be repetitive to have him and Corey Hart on the same team because at that point you're forcing Corey Hart to play in the field, which maybe isn't the best idea for a guy coming off of knee surgery. But at the same time, I think it's a situation that could have worked itself out. So I don't know. Obviously you can't predict the market like that. It's been a pretty unpredictable free agent market. I don't think anyone thought Kendrys Morales was still going to be available on March 20, whatever it is today. So in that sense, I guess you can't look at it. I guess hindsight's 20/20 is what I'm trying to say. I think this team also has a move to make. They have a pretty strong group of farms. So they have a pretty strong crop of prospects that are just coming up now. You look at a Taijuan Walker, although James Paxton and I can't remember the other guy's name. Yep, Danny Holtzen, that's his name. I can't believe I forgot that name. That's embarrassing. Although they've regressed a little bit as prospects, I still think they can come up and be good, middle to back end of the rotation type of guys. And then, they also got pretty productive seasons out of, obviously, Sashi Iwakuma last year. I think was second in Cy Young voting. And I think they have some good depth at their pitching. I also think they have a move to make with a guy like Brad Miller or Nick Franklin. Now that Cano is there, you're only going to need one of those, Miller or Franklin, one of those guys. I think the other becomes trade bait. So this is a team with moves to make in the future and tons of money to spend. So I think it's a team with a bright future ahead. But I don't think this is going to be the year to make a playoff push. I don't think there's enough talent on the team quite yet. They did lose Raul Ibanez, who ended up being a decent signing for them last year. He hit 29 home runs. So, it is a team that is going to take a step back from guys like that, losing Raul Ibanez, losing Kendrys Morales. I don't think this is going to be the year where they have a huge improvement quite yet, but I think it's a team that's putting themselves in position to, compete in the coming years. But do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of wonder, why didn't they go after Nelson Cruz? I mean, he would have been a really good part of that offense. I mean, looking at this lineup, I mean, you do have Robinson Cano probably in third, but I mean, I think another really power hitter would really help this offense out and really boost them a lot. I mean, this team obviously struggles to score runs, and having Robinson Cano in the lineup is going to be nice, but I don't think it's going to be a huge improvement for them to really score a ton more runs. So, and I just think that this pitching staff, I mean, it's kind of iffy right now. Obviously, you have King Felix at the top, but besides that, Iwakuma's injured. I know Taijuan Walker's also injured. So, I mean, this rotation really doesn't look that deep. I mean, behind them you have Erasmo Ramirez, then James Paxton, who he's really unproven. You have Scott Baker and Randy Wolf. So, I mean, I just think that pitching depth is really going to hurt him this year. I mean, I thought it was going to be kind of a strong suit with them having Iwakuma and Walker, but right now I'm really not sure about that.
All right, so we'll move on to the off-season portion of the Seattle Mariners. I'll go first. I gave them a B-. From a pure transaction standpoint, I didn't love the offseason because obviously the Cano signing is going to become an albatross contract. Fernando Rodney, I think committing $14 million to that guy, I don't think is too smart. And I also think that even though you kind of gave up nothing for Logan Morrison, I just don't like the idea of creating a logjam at that first base DH type of spot when you have a guy like Corey Hart and like Justin Smoke. So from a pure transaction point, I didn't love their offseason. I thought it was okay. I thought more so the better part of it was kind of announcing their presence, like I talked about, as a team or as a force that's going to be reckoned with in the coming years when it comes to free agency. But Ryan, what do you think?
I'm giving them a B. I definitely like going out there and getting Robinson Cano and definitely stating that we actually do want to become competitive. Actually give Felix Hernandez some run support when he pitches. I definitely like that. And also with the Logan Morrison, I mean, yeah, it does kind of create a log jam, but you can also say that you're also giving your team a lot of depth over there on the right side. So I do kind of like that a little bit. And also Corey Hart, I mean, if he's healthy, $6 million is definitely going to be a little bit under for him. He'll definitely probably be worth more. So we'll see how he plays with that contract.
All right, and we'll go to the over-under. The over-under this team is 81, which is right at 500. To put that in perspective, last year they won 71. I'm going under. Like I said, I don't think this is quite the year where they're going to kind of make that leap and make that leap towards becoming a wild card contender. I also think they're going to be playing in a really tough division this year, which will hurt them. So I'm going with the under.
I'm taking the over, but I don't think it's going to be by too much. I think they can definitely probably finish around 83, 84 wins. I think Robinson Cano and this team is really going to help them out a lot. And at the deadline, they can definitely become maybe buyers for a big bat to help out with Robinson Cano. I mean, they do have the prospects to potentially do it. So, I'd say the over on this team, probably around 83 wins, though.
All right, and we'll move on to the next team, which I will talk about, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. The Angels last year finished in third place. They went 78 and 84. They had a pretty big offseason. They made a big trade at the winter meetings, trading away Mark Trumbo, and I don't believe they traded anyone else in that trade. They got back Hector Santiago and Tyler Skaggs. Santiago had a 3.56 ERA last year, but he also had a 1.4 WHIP, which is a little bit high. And they got Tyler Skaggs, a former top prospect for the Arizona Diamondbacks, so he could turn into something. He still has a good potential, I would say. They also ended up losing Peter Borges in a trade in which they sent him to St. Louis for David Freese. They had a big hole at third base last year, and with Trumbo gone, they'll plug Freese in there. He'll be a little bit better defensively. Maybe not be the same bat that Trumbo was, but I think overall is a better fit there. They also lost Jason Vargas, who signed with the Kansas City Royals. They lost Tommy Hanson and Jerome Williams, but those guys are both currently still free agents. And other than David Freese and the guys that I mentioned before, they also signed Raul Ibanez, a guy that had a pretty good 2014 and has aged pretty well. So, that could turn into a plus signing for them. They also got Joe Smith from the Cleveland Indians, who will help out to, I think, a bullpen that can be pretty effective in 2014. Smith had a 2.29 ERA last year with a 1.22 WHIP. And they also got Fernando Salas from the Cardinals, who was good in 2011 but hasn't really been the same since. So they're taking a flyer on a guy like that. But Ryan, what do you think of this team for 2014?
I think this team has like a really good chance to potentially win this division. I think they made themselves a lot better in this offseason by getting David Freese. I mean, this team just has a ton of hitters. You get Albert Pujols back this year, and he has looked healthy so far. Obviously, Mike Trout. And if they can get Josh Hamilton going, I definitely think that maybe last year was definitely a down year for him, but I definitely think he can recover from that. So I think this team is very interesting. Obviously, starting pitching may become an issue with them. It's not too deep there behind Jared Weaver and C.J. Wilson. Tyler Skaggs, maybe he can make the rotation. Joe Bland's there too. And like you said, in the bullpen, who's going to be probably really good, Ernesto Frieri is moving to closing this year. Or no, did he close last year? I can't really remember that one.
I believe he did. I know he closed in 2012, and I'm pretty sure he closed. I can look that up. But yeah, he closed last year. 37 saves.
Okay. But I think that getting Joe Smith, that's going to be a really good part of that bullpen as well. I mean, took him from the frickin' Indians. But, I think also getting Raul Ibanez, I mean, this team has a ton of hitters in the middle of that lineup. It's going to be pretty fearsome. Obviously, if you even throw in Howie Kendrick and Eric Ibar in there, who hit for a decent average sometimes. So this team's lineup looks actually very intimidating this year.
This is a team that I liked their offseason. And it was an offseason that I think was very similar to what they did in the 2012 offseason, which was take some of their areas where they had good depth at the major league level and trade those players for areas where they had weaknesses at the major league level. For example, they traded Jordan Walden, a bullpen piece, for Tommy Hanson when they had a weakness in their starting rotation. They also traded Kendrys Morales when they had depth after the Albert Pujols signing and after Trumbo came up and all that. And they traded them for Jason Vargas to also try to address that starter spot. Because like you said, they don't have a lot of depth behind C.J. Wilson and Jared Weaver. And I think they did that again this year when they did a trade like Peter Borges for David Freese, when they have a ton of outfield depth with obviously Hamilton and Trout. And then they also have Cole Calhoun and J.B. Shuck, two guys who were pretty productive in spurts last year. And Cole Calhoun's a guy that a lot of people are pointing to as a potential breakout candidate. And I think so. It was a very similar offseason in that sense. And then they have Raul Ibanez, who can plug in that DH spot. Also can give them some outfield, I guess, innings, so to say. I guess there's not really a term for that, but you can give them some games in left field if need be, especially if guys like Shuck or Calhoun end up flopping. And I mean, once again, I like their offseason. They signed a guy like Joe Smith, who is going to add to an already pretty decent bullpen. Dane De La Rosa looked pretty good last year in 72 in the third innings. I think Frieri can bounce back. I can never pronounce that name, but I think Frieri can potentially bounce back. Obviously, they lost Scott Downs midway through the year, but I think the bullpen can be okay this year moving forward. And a bullpen is always easy to address at the deadline. So if that's your one weakness moving into the season, I don't think that's one that you have to be too concerned about. As for their rotation, I think that's the big question with this team. Obviously, Wilson and Weaver both had pretty good years last year. Wilson with a 3.39 ERA and a 1.34 WHIP. Weaver had a 3.27 and a 1.14 WHIP. He missed a lot of time, though, with a broken arm. He missed 8 starts. So if he can bounce back and be a healthy Cy Young candidate again, I think that's a big plus for them. After that, you have to look at guys like Santiago and Skaggs, and I don't know who's going to win the 5th starter spot. Maybe Joe Blandon, who was god-awful last year. He went 2-14.
He's got an ERA of 7 right now.
Yeah, it's not good. I don't know who they're going to point to as that 5th starter. They don't have a strong farm system, so I don't think they're going to have any guys to point to down there. But, who knows? But I think that's going to be their one question mark going into the year once again. And I think if they end up struggling, it's going to ultimately be their downfall once again. Because I think their offense is fine. Like I said, I like addressing their third base need with a guy like David Freese. He'll fill in for Alberto Callaspo, who was traded at the deadline last year. And I have no idea who played third base for them at the end of the year. Probably Andrew Romine or maybe Chris Nelson, I think. Freese will probably be an upgrade over those guys, even though he struggled last year. He's a career 286 hitter, I think. So I think he can bounce back. And then you plug Poulsen at first base, Ibanez in at DH, Hamilton and Trout in the outfield, Iannetta behind the plate. Like, I think you have a pretty solid offense there. So I think it's going to be their pitching once again. That's going to be their big question mark going in. But Ryan, do you have any more thoughts?
No, we'll get into the off-season grades, and I'll go first right here. I'm going to give them a B+. I definitely think that going out there and getting David Freese, being aggressive, trading away Trumbo. I mean, if you get rid of Trumbo, if Raul Ibanez can continue to hit around 30 home runs a year, which I don't think he will. I think he'll probably be more towards like 20 this year. He is still getting older. He's what, 40? He's 40, right?
He's old. He's old. He's in his 40s.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think he's gonna get back to 29 home runs this year, but definitely still gonna provide that power right there. So, Joe Smith as well, helping out that bullpen, just getting a lot better. This team got a lot better this offseason, except in their starting rotation, which might be their killer.
Yep. I gotta agree. I gave them a B+ as well. It's a team with a weak farm system and not a lot of assets to trade with, but the ones that they did have, like Borges, who was just depth at that point in the outfield, and like Mark Trumbo, who was also depth at the corners. I think that they used those guys effectively in trades to try to shore up some of their needs in their rotation and their bullpen. And I think they did what they could, which is why I gave them a B+. It's a very similar offseason to last season. I liked their offseason last year. Aside from I wasn't a big fan of the Hamilton signing at the time, and it looks even worse now. But I liked their way of thinking in that sense. And it's just going to be another question of if it works out, especially with their pitching moves, getting guys like Santiago and Skaggs. But overall, I like their thought process, and I liked how they went about things. So I gave them a B+. But you want to move on to the over/under?
Yeah, so the over/under on this team is 85.5, and I'll go first. I'm going to give them an over, but I don't think they're going to get it by much. I just think that this team is going to continue to struggle a little bit. I mean, obviously last year they were expected to do really big, and they didn't. I don't know if Albert Pujols is going to be really, really healthy this year. Definitely some injury concerns with both him and Josh Hamilton a little bit. So I just think this rotation is really going to hurt him this year and probably be over 85.5, but not by that much.
I originally had this team going over, but I think I'm going to take the under, actually. My thought process for the over was their Pythagorean win-loss, which I talked about in the last podcast, was 81-81, so it's 3 wins better than their actual record. And I think it is a team that could potentially bounce back and live up to some of those expectations that they've had for the last couple of years. But I think I just hate a team with thin, weak pitching. I don't really trust Hector Santiago to be a 3.56 ERA type of guy again. And past that, it's so many question marks that I just can't talk myself into this team in this division winning more than 85.5 games or whatever it is. 85.5 games. So I'm going to take the under. But I think I could see this team going over. I do not like their pitching enough to say they're going to. So I'm going to take the under.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, we're going to be moving into the Texas Rangers, who finished 91-72, second in the AL West. They did get to the playoffs, but, well, technically not really the playoffs, but I kind of consider it. They did have to play that extra game with the Tampa Bay Rays, in which they ended up losing. So they did have a pretty good season last year. The key departures, they lost Jeff Baker, they lost Lance Berkman, whatever. They also lost Nelson Cruz, and they also lost Matt Garza. Craig Cheney, this is a long list. Ian Kinsler, Josh Lindblom, David Murphy to the Indians, Joe Nathan to the Tigers.
Like he plugged in the Indians there.
I have to. Well, we got freaking me, you, and Graham right here. We got David Murphy to the Indians, Joe Nathan to the Tigers, and AJ Przinsky to the Red Sox. Right there. So their key rivals that they got this offseason was JP Aaron Sebia from the Blue Jays, obviously Shin-Soo Choo, which we'll talk about him in a minute. They got Michael Choice and Prince Fielder and Brent Littlebridge. And a little quick note, Jurickson Profar is out for 12 weeks, and Derek Holland out till midseason. So we'll talk about this offseason a little bit. I'll let you go first.
It was definitely a big offseason. It was a lot of big gains and big losses. David Murphy had a down year last year, I believe. He had 220. He only had a 656 OPS. But he's had a pretty successful MLB career up to that point. So I think overall that's going to be a relatively substantial loss. They lose Ian Kinsler, a guy who had declined the last couple of years, but still was finished top 10 in MVP voting in 2011. So obviously he's been a productive player for them in the past. And they're obviously going to point to Jurickson Profar to be that full-time second baseman this year, which I like the move in that sense because you need to open up a slot for a guy with as much talent as Jurickson Profar. But now with him out 12 weeks, obviously that looks like that hurts. But if he comes back in I don't know June or whatever and is the player that we all think he can be, then I think overall that's a smart move to open up a spot for him. And getting a guy like Prince Fielder, who although his contract is absolutely terrible, getting a guy like Prince Fielder in a hitter's park like Arlington Field with that hot air in Arlington, Texas in the middle of the summer, that's a guy that could hit 35, 40 home runs in that ballpark. He was coming off of one of his worst years of his career. He had a 1.7 wins above replacement, which was his lowest since 2010. He only had 279 with a 362 OBP and a 457 slugging, only 21 home runs, and he did have 106 RBI, but it was a down year for him definitely, but I think he can be a productive player in that ballpark. Michael Choice, I liked them getting Michael Choice for Craig Gentry. With the addition of Shin-Soo Choo, I don't think having a guy like Craig Gentry was as needed. And you got a really good power bat in Michael Choice who could come up in a couple of years and really be something, or come up in, maybe even this year or next year and really be something for this team. And then Shin-Soo Choo is a guy that I like a lot. He's a weird player because he has this crazy high OBP of 423, but he's like really bad against lefties, and it's kind of a weird player to figure out. And he gets so much of his high OBP off of hit by pitches, which you can talk about whether or not that's sustainable. It might not be the healthiest thing for him to be doing as he kind of gets up there in age. He is, I think, like 30 now, and he had a 7-year contract. So you think about a guy taking that many pitches off of him at the age of 35. I don't know if I'd be wanting to do that, so maybe he has to take a step back in that sense. But it was certainly a big offseason, one filled with moves. They also lost Matt Garza, a guy that they acquired at the deadline last year, who was pretty productive for them, I believe, in the second half. But I think they're really going to miss Derek Holland for that first half of the year. I look at their rotation, and it's obviously a very top-heavy rotation with Yu Darvish. Alexi Ogando is pretty good in the 18 starts he made last year. Martin Perez looked pretty good, especially at the end of the year. But I think Holland is a really key piece there, and I think if he comes back and he's healthy by the midway point of the season, I think that team can take off at that point. They're also going to miss Joe Nathan, I think. I don't know who's going to be the closer for this team. I imagine maybe
Joakim Soria.
Oh, right, they did get Soria. Yeah, he was. Yeah, I think he was hurt last year, but if he comes back and he's healthy, then he can be the closer for them, and I think he can fill that role pretty well. He's they also got Naftali Feliz back this year, so that's big for that bullpen. You think you add that to Tanner Scheppers and Neil Kotz, who both had really good years last year. I think you have a pretty solid bullpen. So I think it's about this team getting healthy, and if you get a solid rotation around this offense, this team could take off. It's a pretty talented group, and I think it's an improvement over last year's team. So I like their offseason overall, and I like this team moving forward. But do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna talk about the Prince Fielder signing the trade real quick, because I really think that getting rid of Ian Kinsler was really big, just so that you can open up finally that middle of the infield to bring up Jurickson Profar, who once healthy, I think he's gonna be doing pretty well. So you do trade him away, but you get Prince Fielder, who's gonna provide a lot more production at first base, I think, over Mitch Moreland, who last year only hit 232. So if you get that, that's definitely going to help your offense out a lot. And obviously having Profar and Andrews in the middle, you're basically you're trading away some of your depth, but at the same time you're gaining a ton from both positions. So I definitely like that deal a lot.
I agree. So do you want to move on? Oh, they have still. For some reason I thought they lost Alex Rios, but no, they still have him. I don't know what I was thinking. So do you want to move on to the offseason grades?
Yeah, we'll go ahead. I'll let you go first.
I'll go first. I give them a B. I think their offseason's a little bit overrated, just because they did make a lot of big moves, getting guys like Prince Fielder and Shin-Soo Choo. I also think they're going to lose. I think they're going to miss some guys like Nelson Cruz, who, although only played 100 and something games for them last year, still had 27 home runs. And then Garza was a good stable piece for that rotation at the end of the year. I don't think they'll miss Przinsky too much, but Kinsler they could miss. Murphy, Gentry. I mean, they lost a lot of guys, and that's why I don't think their offseason was as great as everyone thinks. But I just think their pieces kind of fit more now, which is why I kind of like the moves that they did make. And overall, I gave them a B.
I really like their offseason. I definitely like getting Prince Fielder, being really aggressive with that. I mean, I like that trade a lot. I think he's going to do really well this year with that. And then obviously getting Shinsu too, who just gets on base a ton. I think that that's really going to bolster this team a lot, and definitely we'll be able to power them towards the front of this division, and hopefully we'll actually be able to get into the playoffs this year technically. So, I gave them a B plus for that.
All right, move on to the over/under. The over/under for this team is 87, which I'm pretty surprised by because that would be a 4-win decrease from last year, which is surprising to me because I'm going to take the over. I don't see this team being any worse than they were last year. I think Fielder is going to be a better player than Kinsler was if you take into account the fact that Profar is also going to be there. So I think the Profar you're going to get out of Fielder and Profar is going to be more than what you got out of Kinsler and Moreland last year. I think Chu is a better player than Nelson Cruz, and I think that I just think this team overall is better than they were last year. So I don't see them getting any worse. So I'm going to take the over.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that this team really decreased at all this offseason. I really don't understand why that's actually at 87, so I would put it like 91. But I definitely think that losing Matt Garza really isn't that big of a deal for this team. Obviously, you do lose a little bit of depth right there, but I think this team is going to be fine either way with that. And just Shinsu too, he's going to help this team out so much with that 423 OBP. That's so high. But, yeah, I just. Yeah, I just think this team is set, and I'm definitely taking the over on that.
And I think Matt Harrison's coming back soon too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's made his spring training debut a couple days ago, or like a week ago. So if he comes back and he's the player that he was in 2011 and 2012, that's another bonus. And I think if he comes back and he's healthy, that can almost offset the Derek Holland loss. So like just another fact I throw in there. But do you want to move on to the, or I guess I'm talking about them. The final team, the Oakland Athletics, went 96-66 last season. First in the AL West. That was good for first, obviously. And I believe they had the second best record in the AL. They had a pretty busy offseason. They extended Coco Crisp with a 2-year contract extension worth $22 and something million with a 3rd-year option. They lost Grant Balfour and Bartolo Colon to free agency. They signed Sam Fuld, who could be their 5th outfielder for them. They signed Scott Kazmir to a $23 million contract over 2 years. They acquired Jim Johnson from the Oakland Athletic, they acquired Jim Johnson from the Baltimore Orioles for David Friedis and Jemiah Weeks. Jim Johnson, I also believe, got a 1-year, $10 million contract from the A's. They also traded away Jerry Blevins for Billy Burns. Billy Burns is one of the fastest guys in baseball. He's hitting .315, or he hit .315 in the minor leagues last year. They traded Brett Anderson, their often injured former ace, for Drew Pomeranz and Chris Jensen from the Rockies. They also got Luke Gregerson for Seth Smith, and they got Craig Gentry and Josh Lindblom from Texas for Michael Choice. So it was a pretty busy offseason, and it really shook up the roster. They also lost Jared Parker to Tommy John surgery, and I don't know if A.J. Griffin is also having Tommy John, but I know he's hurt. I'm not too sure, but I guess he's out several weeks. Anyway, Ryan, what do you think about this team?
Yeah, I just think that them losing 3 of their pitchers, I mean, it's not only counting as the offseason with Jared Parker, but still, just losing 3 of their pitchers, Brett Anderson, Colon, and obviously Parker, that's really going to be a little bit big to this team. But I think Billy Beane's just playing beanball still. I mean, a lot of these moves are very minor, but I mean, he's just out there, he's just making his little moves he's got. And obviously, I think Scott Kazmir is going to be a little bit overrated. Obviously, last year with the Indians, he had a nice year, but I don't know if he's worth $2 million over the next, or $23 million over the next 2 years. I mean, I think that contract's a little bit scary, especially if his injuries either come back or if he goes back to having ERAs in the 5s. So, I mean, I can definitely see it playing out and actually working pretty well. But I think at this point it's a little bit early to gamble on that. Also getting Jim Johnson, he's going to be replacing Grant Balfour in the bullpen. Who did Balfour sign with?
Balfour ended up going to Tampa Bay. I believe 2 years and $15 million, maybe something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you do lose Balfour, which was a really big piece of that bullpen last year. But getting Jim Johnson, if he can get back to what he was in 2012, obviously that'll be a really nice bullpen. I think that the Athletics they're able to rebuild a lot of guys and get them back to how they used to perform. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have for them.
Yeah, I don't know. Their offseason was interesting. I didn't love the Scott Kazmir signing. I thought Kazmir or Colon to Kazmir is going to be a downgrade, and considering what Colon signed for, I think I would have just opted to re-up Cologne for 2 years, $20 million instead of giving Kazmir $23 million. I also didn't love giving Jim Johnson $10 million over just giving Grant Balfour 2 for 15 or whatever he got, especially because Balfour was a really big fan favorite in Oakland. So I didn't love it in that sense. It's weird because they spent a lot of money this offseason, or I guess a lot for the A's, I should say. And they also traded away one of their top prospects for a fourth outfielder. So it really seems like Billy Beane's going for it this year. I think, he's kind of got a good group of young talent up in the majors now. They've kind of established themselves with guys like Josh Donaldson, obviously Jared Parker pre-Tommy John surgery, and I think maybe he was hoping for Parker to be a key piece this year. And A.J. Griffin. I think, some of this young core that they have is, starting to hit their stride in their second and third and fourth MLB seasons. And I think Billy Beane really wants to go for it this year. I think that's why he spent so much money. That's why he traded a guy like Michael Choice for, an extra fourth outfielder like Craig Gentry. And I don't know if it's going to work out like that because I didn't love some of their moves. Like I said, I think Cologne to Kazmir's a downgrade. I think Balfour to Johnson's a downgrade. And, I don't know where Craig Gentry really fits in. I like Gentry as a player, but I don't know exactly where he fits in. So I like them being aggressive because I think it is the right time to be aggressive with this group. I guess the Parker thing really hurts, and overall I wasn't in love with exactly how they went about being aggressive. But do you have anything else to say, or do you want to move on?
No, we'll go ahead and get to the off-season grade. So I'll go first. I gave them a C+. I really didn't think that it was that great of an offseason. I mean, obviously getting Scott Kazmir, I think that's a good deal to get a good player like him, but we don't know how well he's going to do this year and if he's going to be worth that much. That's a lot of money for the Athletics to be shelling out. Also the $10 million deal with Jim Johnson. So I don't know where some of this money could have been allocated, but I really just didn't like their offseason at all.
I gave them a B-. I guess the only reason I gave them, anything above a C is because I like the fact that they're being aggressive, but like I said, I just didn't like how they went about being aggressive. I thought there was better ways to allocate their money, like just re-signing Cologne or re-signing Balfour, keeping the guys that they kind of had. And moving forward to it, obviously I understand that after 2 ALDS losses, you got to do something to shake it up and try to get better. But I guess I didn't like the way they went about it. And we'll move on to the over-under. The over-under for this team is 86.5. And Ryan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first in this. On 86.5, I know a lot of people will probably be taking the over, but I'm taking the under, and it seems like whenever I think the A's are going to struggle in the season, obviously the last 2 years they won the division, and they always usually seem to somehow prove me wrong, but I'm taking the under on this. I just don't like the pitching depth. I think that losing Jared Parker is going to be huge for this team. I think it's going to be a major blow, and I mean, this rotation is full of just a bunch of young guys, obviously. Like, you got Sonny Gray, you got Straley in there, even Drew Pomeranz, who might be able to make that fifth starter spot. We don't know yet, but I mean, yeah, I just think that this team doesn't have a lot of depth starter wise. Just a lot of young guys, and they can really be unpredictable. So I'm gonna take the under on that.
I'm going with the over. Obviously, it's not one of the most talented teams in the world, but it's a team that's won 90+ games the last 2 years and won 96 last year. So they'd have to decrease their win total by 10 to get the under this year. And although like I said, I didn't love their offseason, they're definitely gonna miss Jared Parker. And A.J. Griffin for however long he's out, and I think they'll miss Bartolo Colon as well. I still think that you have Tommy Malone, you have Dan Straley, you have Sonny Gray. I still like their starting rotation, and I think it's a team that is just very well coached, very well managed, and very well run, so to say, by that organization top to bottom. So I like, I just can't bet against this team after the last couple of years, and I don't think they're going to be, a whole 10 games worse than they were last year. So I'm gonna take the over. But I don't know if they're going to be the same team that they were last year. I think they'll be considerably worse. But that pretty much does it for the AL West. So that wraps up the 4th podcast of the 2014 MLB Season Preview Podcast. Tomorrow will be the AL Central. And
Oh dear.
yeah, here we go. Ryan's favorite team. If you guys didn't know, Ryan's a big Athletics fan. So sure he'll have a lot to say about Athletics. Big Indians fan. I've been getting my words mixed up all night. He's a big Indians fan, so he'll have a lot to say. So tune into that one. But anyway, that's gonna do it. Ryan, why don't you send us out?
All right, guys. Well, we're gonna be here with the AL Central tomorrow. Can't wait to talk about everyone's favorite teams there. Obviously, Indians. No, but it's gonna be interesting. We'll get to talk a little bit about the Tigers and then slap them around a little bit. But so that does it for this podcast. For Ian, this is Brian, and we will see you guys tomorrow.